Hello, and thanks for joining us for 5 Miles Easy, where we go behind the scenes on the highs, lows, and uphill battles on our running journeys and bring you conversations to inspire, motivate, and get you one step closer to your goals.
So let's lace up for 5 Miles Easy. Hello, today on the show we're going to be joined by Dr. George Bownes, and here is a little snippet of what's to come.
Public health recommendation is 150 minutes of physical activity in a week for an adult, okay, 18 to 64, all right? However, 27% of the adult population are thought to do, if you could give people one drug that would solve the majority of their problems, whether that's mental health, respiratory illness, cardiovascular illness, diabetes. Don't be a slave to your program. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
So we are so excited to dig into the hub of knowledge that is George's brains on all things injury, pushing your limits in running and elite sport, and asking the very big question of, is running healthy? But before we get started with that, Steph, what has been happening in the life of Steph McCall? How's your week been?
Oh, my week. Okay, so I've been trying to catch up with a lot of sleep, been a bit jet lagged, got back from a very fun holiday in North America, got back like a week and a half ago now, but it's just been getting back into work, then a bank holiday, and then just all out of sync, but I'm getting there. And I think I've got the extra pressure of trying to cram in all the sleep because, for context, we are recording the week of the big half. Yeah. So we know it's important to get that rest in before racing. So, yes.
Yeah,
right.
Race week for both of us.
Yeah,
exciting.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, your trip looked insane. I feel like every time I go on Instagram, it's like a picture from Steph's trip to Canada, and yeah, it's making me very jealous. But
no, it was great fun.
The travel account.
My travel account. I mean, it's the only time I get good photos, so that's what I post. But yeah, it was great. And also, I find like when I go away, I don't, unless I'm recovering from a big race, I don't want to miss out on my training. So I always make sure I can prioritize that as well. And it was a great place to go to be able to train really well. I feel like there were just so many great cycle paths, and yeah, you get some good sessions in. So I feel like I'm well prepared.
Nice.
And rested without having to work. So yeah.
Yeah, minus the jet lag.
Yeah, minus the jet lag, but we're getting there now.
You'll be good by the weekend.
Yeah. And what have you been up to? How are you feeling for the weekend?
I mean, less exciting. Been very much pretty much in London. But yeah, training's been going well. Had pretty uneventful week in a good way. Having said that, I did my last session today, and you know that last session before a race, you expect it to feel so easy.
Yeah.
And it didn't. And I also went into it thinking, oh, it's only a little session. And I was by myself. My usual training partner, Ben, has gone on holiday, which is just not allowed. So I had a solo session on the track in Tooting. There was a kids club there, so it was like hectic.
Those summer clubs.
So hectic. And I kind of went into it with that mindset of like, oh, it's the last session, it's going to be easy. And actually it wasn't easy, which
but I think you're way more switched on, like in tune with how you're feeling in that session before a race, because you're thinking, right, I need to feel, at my peak for this race. So you want the session to feel really good, but actually you're not thinking about that in other sessions, you're just kind of doing them.
Yeah, especially when you're by yourself, I think about how I'm feeling so much more.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm with someone else, it's just like, you're either following them, or my thought is like, don't let them down for this rep. Hold it together.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It's, overthinking. But I do feel like training's gone well. And actually before like the last couple of days, I've been feeling just very excited for the big half.
That's good.
But I think I've got a bit of late onset half paranoia creeping in.
Yeah. I think I've been distracted the last few weeks, and now I'm on that like race week kind of like trying to, as we discussed before, like trying to implement these mental strategies where I'm not overthinking everything on race week. And just sort of having that rational brain switched on. Yeah, I am excited. So it'll just be interesting to see how it goes. And yeah, we'll definitely do a recap afterwards. And for you, will the big half then be, 3 weeks out from Berlin?
Well, update on that. I've also, having said I've had an uneventful week, I've actually had quite a stressful week because I'm not into Berlin.
No.
After very confidently saying on, I think 2 episodes that I'm into Berlin, I'm now not. So ignore that, listeners who watched episode 1 and 2.
Yeah.
A little insight into the elite marathon world here. You don't actually just get into marathons, which...
It seems to be harder.
It's really bizarre, and it's actually not something I realised, hence why I was so blazingly confident about my spot. But it's a lot harder than I thought, and it's a funny one because I've only really done London and Seville. London is quite easy to get into as a British marathoner because they want the Brits doing it.
Yeah.
The other marathon majors just operate completely differently, which is something I had no idea about. And I don't have an agent, so I'm sort of learning on the job a bit. And on this occasion, I've learnt the hard way. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, thought I had a spot, and I just hadn't heard anything, but kind of assumed it would be all right, and it wasn't. So it's full, and I didn't get in.
Okay, so will we get an update
We
soon?
will get an update. I do actually I know what, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to jinx it again, but hopefully have actually sorted my quandary for the autumn marathon. But yeah, I'm not announcing anything right now, so stay tuned.
But either way, you're going to do one. This training is not going to waste because you've done some mammoth sessions.
This episode is sponsored by Puma Running, and we have a very special discount code for our 5 Miles Easy listeners. You can get 25% off any Puma running product by using the code 5ME25 at uk.puma.com.
George, we are so excited to have you on the show today. First question, what is your why when it comes to running?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm very much excited about being here. I love your Simon Sinek question. I think probably like you guys are higher end runners than me. So I'm not going out there to try and win events. I'm just going out there for the love of it. And so I think it's the way it breaks up your life. I obviously spend a lot of time sitting in clinics and you see people who are injured, and then you start talking to them about where exercise and running particularly fits for them, and when they lose it, how that can then have impacts on the rest of their life, particularly like stress management, things like that. And I think that's the kind of the freedom that running gives you, particularly if there's nice places like Richmond Park, isn't there, in Bushy and all those kind of places. But if you think further afield, this year I wanted to do the Centurion 50, which I've done before, just because it's nice, lovely countryside to run through. And, you can do it. You get a similar thing with cycling, but I think running is the best kind of free event that you can just go and do in your own space and in your own time. Definitely the days, if you've had a bad day, you want to go and do a run. If you're having a good day, you want to go and have a run. And I don't think you necessarily get that from other things.
You mentioned the stress management aspect of it. Now, I can imagine your job must be pretty stressful at times. Would you say, is running your way of managing that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's funny when you go to conferences and you've got a group of sports medicine people together and physios and all these other people where you have factored physical activity into the program, which is great. And, physical activity is how sport and exercise medicine as a specialty was brought out, if you like. It's a legacy from the 2012 Olympics. So when in 2007 the Olympics was granted to London, the exercise element and trying to get people more physically active, whatever that was going to be for them, something that they enjoyed doing, because not everyone loves running, just because we do.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone does.
Can't understand it.
I don't, exactly.
Anyway.
What is that about? But, trying to get people more physically active being the key, and then doing it in a safe way, which is why you see, so the NHS has a couch to 5K, couch to 10K. You know, it's just trying to engage people in their own little space around, you know, running being one of them, but other activities being, you know, maybe something that it leads them on to doing.
So I think we can all agree that great mental health benefits from running, and generally exercise is good for you. But you obviously work in a slightly different area because you're in elite sport. And so you see athletes pushing their bodies to the absolute limit on a pretty much daily basis. You know, I can speak from my own experience, and my goal is kind of to push my body as hard as it can and find that line like just before it breaks, and kind of operate at that level for as long as I can, essentially. You're always pushing the barriers, and, you know, sometimes you get it wrong and you tip over, and that's when injuries happen, which, again, you must see that a lot.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to get your thoughts on whether that is healthy. You know, is elite sport healthy? And is it healthy to be pushing our bodies that far, that often?
Yeah. So when you go to conferences, you get people, they chuck these out as like academic debates when you get various people coming up and debating it. I think the important thing with when you think about elite sport like that is thinking about the whole landscape, kind of just going back to what we were just saying about physical activity. So public health recommendation is 150 minutes of physical activity in a week for an adult, okay, 18 to 64, all right? However, 27% of the adult population are thought to do less than 30 minutes physical activity in a month.
Wow.
27%. That's research proven, okay? So that's a huge amount of people. If you think let's say there's 70 million, these are rough figures, okay, so don't hold me to it, but 70 million people in the UK, let's say there's 20 million under 18s. There's, I don't know how many people over 64, but let's say there's another big, massive chunk of those. So the majority of the adult population, you're looking at 40 million probably, quite comfortably. And you're saying that 27% of those people do less than 30 minutes. So anything for those people in the physical activity space, walking to the shops, getting off the bus one stop early and walking home is going to start pushing you in the right direction. Because physical inactivity is the fourth biggest killer.
Yeah, that's shocking, isn't it?
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
And there's no skill required to walk down the street.
Something so preventative.
Sense. But what are the barriers that are holding people back? Whether that is depression, whether that's obesity, whether that's concerns about cardiac health or whatever. But if you could give people one drug that would solve the majority of their problems, whether that's mental health, respiratory illness, cardiovascular illness, diabetes, it's physical activity. So the more that we look at that, and then you've got elite sport right at the top end, done by very, very few people. I don't know how many professional footballers there are in the country, but you know what I mean? There's 4 main leagues, basically, isn't there? Mm. And then, you know, look at all the other Olympic sports stuff. Very, very few people do it. And so, yes, when you're pushing yourself, as you say, very, very hard, you might get a cardiac problem or a rare respiratory condition or a muscular injury or a bigger injury. You know, like contact sports, for example, you have a big knee injury, it takes you out for a while. Your arthritic risk is going to go up down the line. But if you ask those people, would you rather do this or would you rather do something else? They're pretty much always going to say that they'd like to do it. And there's a whole industry that obviously sits around sport in terms of building the facilities and the entertainment value that it brings and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I think in general it's a force for good. And I think it's a shame when it gets criticised, if I'm honest.
Also wondering what you were just saying about those at the other end where we're trying to get more people active. Do you think enough is being done about it? I know we said there's Couch to 5K and other schemes going on to try and get people into moving more. Yeah. But what else can be done?
So moving medicine is a public health, Faculty of Sport and Exercise Medicine collaboration, really. It's supported by the other Royal Colleges, etc., about how to educate healthcare professionals to give some advice to the population, basically, whether that's 1 minute 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and just trying to sow some good seeds in there. It's not a criticism of the pharmaceutical companies, but if you're an American, and you're just about to become diabetic on the blood sugar scales, they'll start offering you medication. But the studies show that if you actually offered people physical activity and you got them to continue doing it, and you've got to find something they enjoy. Don't just tell someone you've got to go running, because it doesn't work for everybody.
No, of course.
Whatever it is, you get people being more physically active. And I use that example of you get off the bus one stop earlier, just to do a little bit more, and then you build that up. You can stop people progressing into diabetes if you use that approach. So if you need as many people as possible basically telling that message and repeating that message and doing it on multiple platforms on a regular basis, because you're talking about changing culture, and then you're up against other people who've got different interests, if you like. But if you did the medication and the physical activity, then you're going to get an even better effect. Yeah. So there's a bit of a mindset shift, but much of that is because we're quite reactionary in this country, and also in Western medicine in general, right? We're pretty sedate. We have pretty high density foods. We don't have to be physically active if we don't want to be, as shown by the stats that I gave. And the more that we can be, use the example of lockdown, whether that's riding a bike or going for a walk or going for a run, but just getting out and doing something. You don't have to spend money, which often people use as a barrier. Just trying to get physical activity into your life can make a big difference for you.
I think we can probably agree that being active, doing sport is healthy overall. But what about, so I know you've competed in some ultra endurance events, and
I think compete is a bit strong, but you guys are much better than me, to be fair.
Maybe more than us.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. All right, I'll give you that.
It's pretty impressive. Let's put it that way.
I've done a few bits.
And that's kind of a completely different thing altogether. Like only a very, very small population are doing ultra marathons, Ironmans. Yeah. Or Iron Men, we weren't sure which one it was.
It should be Iron People, really, shouldn't it?
Iron People, yeah.
Iron events, yeah.
Is pushing your body for such a long time, and quite hard for a long time, is that good for you?
I think especially actually as, yes, there are a smaller percentage of the population, but I think it's more, people train less for it. You get...
That's the thing.
You obviously get elites at it as well.
Yeah.
But more kind of... especially now, I know loads of people who are doing ultras, and which is awesome, and Ironman and stuff, but maybe they're not training like elites because they've got full-time jobs.
Exactly, yeah. So you find loads of these people who, and we see them in clinic, who, I'm getting up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning to do something before I then go to work, and then I'm doing something afterwards, and people do it at certain points in their life, don't they? Particularly. So if they've had a bad experience, and that could be a bereavement or a breakup, or they've maybe had a health scare, maybe they've gone and had a health check and they've been told, actually, you need to lose some weight, or your blood pressure is a bit high. And so people get motivated in those different ways to do things, don't they? And then, you like you say, people do sometimes take it to those extremes. And then that's actually where people in the general population who haven't got that support network that you'd have within a high performance setting, they start breaking down.
Yeah.
Or they put themselves at risk. And so actually, probably I would say that those, I hate the word weekend warriors, because it's not, because they're training every day of the week. They almost are training every day of the week. They're not resting like an elite athlete would do.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about time, and they're trying to balance their whole life around this extra new job that they've basically created for themselves.
They're actually probably pushing their bodies even harder.
Exactly, yeah. So, from a upper respiratory tract infection point of view, so there's lots of data on these things. So if you do 10 hours training a week, which is a good amount of training, right? So for most people, average people, even if they're training for these things, that's probably more than most of them are doing. But when you get to that point, that's actually protective, so it improves your immune function. But as soon as you start tipping over 10 hours, your immune function drops quite a lot.
Okay.
And that's so why when you're then an elite athlete and you're probably doing 20, 25 hours a week, you're actually quite immunocompromised. And that's where having supplements, so the use of, multivitamins, probiotics, vitamin D, for example, is needed to kind of keep you healthy. Particularly if you're, let's say you're an ultra runner in the Alps. So, you know, you're going to see all kinds of weather in the same way that a professional cyclist would. And if you're doing it at that level, your body fat's going to drop. So a lot of your resilience that other people would have, you lose. But then that becomes the goal for these people who are doing it, you know, as a bit of a life change, or they're aiming for that big goal of they want to do an Iron event or they want to do a big ultra. So then they try and pursue that. And so if they're then doing it on reduced calorie intake, then they're going to increase their risk of bone stress injuries or muscle injuries or persistent upper respiratory tract infections. And so that's going to massively impact on their performance as well. So actually,
and I guess lack of sleep as well if you're trying to fit it in.
Yeah,
around a job, then you're gonna get even
and then
more
you're just smashing loads of caffeine.
Yeah.
To try and keep yourself awake whilst you do your, no doubt, stressful job, balance your life, all that kind of stuff.
So what's your recommendation on what to prioritise?
Oh, I mean, that's like the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, sleep's a great recovery tool that a lot of people probably don't value enough, I think, to be fair. Cross training is also another big thing. You know, I think when we see a lot of runners say when they come in injured, whatever and it's generally a lower body injury, isn't it? And so they can't go running, but what else can they do? And so you say, oh well, you know, can you bring something else in, like swimming or cycling, perhaps, or maybe, you know, another activity like that. It's quite good because it just offloads them. So most of the couch to 5k, couch to 10k, or people who are trying to smash a certain time at a marathon, they just end up doing too much running.
Yeah.
And then that increases their risk of those bone stress injuries or other injuries that they might pick up that they haven't necessarily addressed because they're running in old trainers, for example, rather than something that's appropriate for their foot type and their gait analysis and all those other bits that if you're more of a full-time athlete with a nice Puma deal, that you'd have time to focus on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, it's all relative, right? So you don't have to, it's not just people who are running, you know, 70 plus miles a week. If you go from running, I don't know, 20 to 40 because you're trying to smash a marathon, you're going to have that same risk.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, in elite sport, they talk about acute versus chronic load, and you guys will know about this. So acute is what you're doing that week, and then the chronic is what you've done in the last 4 weeks. So when you're organising your training blocks, you'll look at increasing that acute load every week for those 4 weeks, and then you'll have a down week, so just so you can recover, but still train, do a little low level, and then you're trying to build it up every time. If you haven't planned your training because you just want to run a marathon, you just want to go and do it, then you might have all these peaks and troughs, and then that's where you're going to subject yourself to more injuries. So there's always this thing between the sort of spring and the autumn main season of when, say, marathons are on, because they tend to be the ones that really provoke injuries in most people. You get this kind of 4 to 3 weeks just before where the injury loads come up into clinics across the country, and things get missed naturally. But yeah, every spring and autumn I'm getting people coming in with injuries, and you're like, look, you really shouldn't be going, you know, my advice is to not go and run this event. And that if they do, they generally don't achieve what they do, and they make their injury worse. But you know, you always hope that people are coming to you at a time when maybe they're planning it.
Late.
Yeah, it's not too late.
What's the most common running injury that you see? Is there one that just stands out?
Medial tibial stress fractures always get missed. Seemingly. I've got an age group triathlete, and she's a lawyer in the city, and she's like, I've definitely got one. And she just like literally on tap wants to have a scan. I'm like, I'm pretty sure, you know, full-time Team GB athletes don't get as many scans requests as you're having. But in fairness to her, she's so attuned with her body that she knows when she's done it or not. And then she spent a lot of time then going back through her training log with her coach, and then she's identifying when she happened and when they happen. And actually that's quite good feedback, because she knows that she has the training program and then she goes beyond it on a regular basis, because she's trying to balance this busy job and all that goes with it, and maybe doesn't do the small bits. But I think I see that a lot.
That was when, I got mine when I was working full time, and I think it's exactly as you say. I wasn't doing any of the little things because I always prioritized running, even when I know realistically, and I knew this at the time, by the way, if I actually missed a run and went to the gym instead, I would probably see more benefit. But it's such a difficult thing to do, especially when you've got a coach setting your daily mileage, to not, it's such an easy thing to hit.
Yeah.
And I used to commute to and from the office. So to me, that wasn't any time cost. I'd be like, well, actually, it's quicker than getting the tube. So I'll just run again. And, I was just then also going from sitting down all day to running home and then not going to the gym. And unsurprisingly, I got very injured.
Yeah.
But it's having been there, it is, it's a difficult cycle, even though I knew, and I'd been told by several specialists that do your gym work and it won't happen.
Yeah. That's the thing. But I think that's a particular thing for running, is that runners like running and they don't like doing anything else.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you said at the beginning about gym work, right?
It's so much easier to go out for a run than the effort of going to the gym as well.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, just to add to Rose's point, I think also when you're balancing so many things, it's also like getting the recovery and so the timing, getting your sleep in, but also like the timing of fueling. So eating enough, but also the timing of it. So you're training late, being able to like have a meal or get sufficient energy in after a late session. Yeah. It's hard to like get all of that right when you've literally got no spare time to cram it all in.
And I think if you speak to nutritionists, I remember this one, particularly when you're dealing with sort of academy kids and you're trying to educate them on good things to do. They're like, look, if you're coming back late from something and all you've got is, this is going to be great advertising, McDonald's or a takeaway or something like that, but that's going to give you something better than nothing, then you've got to have it. Not saying you're going to eat that all the time, okay? But, a sensible nutritionist is going to say, look, you've got to take some calories in because it's fuel. And if you don't take the fuel, then you're going to burn. And then what you're burning is either muscle or bone density. And then that you're going to put yourself at risk.
Yeah.
So, and it's, that's why I try when I give advice to patients, with these lower limb injuries, the calf strength is always down. It's like, this is like cleaning your teeth. You've got to do it every day. It's a bit boring, but even if you just do a little bit, you're going to start chipping away and put yourself in a slightly better space. Because you don't want to go to the gym, but doing a few calf raises while you're cleaning your teeth.
Yeah. The ironic thing is it really doesn't take very long at
all.
all.
No, it really doesn't take long, yeah. And you've got to, but that's the thing I think, you've got to try and work with people about, like, what is their barrier and how do you break it down? And then how do you get them to see, like, oh yeah, you're right. Actually, if I just had a sandwich in my bag or I boiled some eggs and I took them to eat on the on the train on the way home, that's going to give me a little bit of protein, better than nothing.
Everyone on the train's going to love that.
Yeah, well, maybe not, but as an example, something that's you could just relatively, no real skill required to boil an egg, if you like, but it can give you something which is better than nothing.
Yeah.
Small steps are better than no steps.
Exactly, yeah. And with no steps, it's actually really going backwards.
So for the non-elite runners of the world who do have the busy jobs and might have to compromise and not have the absolute ideal training, what would be if you could give 3 top tips for injury prevention that are realistic, what would they be? Don't
be a slave to your program. I think that's probably the biggest thing. These programs are often written in an idealized way.
Write these down.
I think it's too late for you.
I think it might be.
But I think that's the thing. I think people go, let's just use a marathon. You've got a 12-week marathon program. The main thing is that you hit that big, whatever the big run of the week is. And then in the week where you're more likely to be busy, if you don't do that 5K on Tuesday, does it matter? No, it probably doesn't. The cross-training bit, I think, is really important. Making sure you've got the right footwear is also really important. Ideally, if you've got 2 pairs of shoes, you're not running in the same shoes the whole time. I think that's helpful. I appreciate there's a cost element for all these things, but you've got to think about the cost of injuries and if and how you're going to feel about it. I think.
Is that because of the foam compression?
What's that?
Why do you say 2 pairs of shoes?
Because what you tend to find is that people will just hammer a pair of. You get this advice from some sports shops, and they're always the people that then come in with an injury. So they'll say to people like, "Don't change your shoes with a month to go." Like, well, you might have to change your shoes with a month to go.
Yeah.
If all you've just done for the last 2 months is running a pair of the same shoes, because you're likely to have shot those, even if they were brand new shoes.
Yeah.
Like, so if you've got 2 pairs, you always, because if you get a wet pair of shoes because you've gone out running in January, you don't want to put them on the next morning if that's when you're going to do it, because your foot's going to slide around, blah blah. So if you've got a kind of idea, that's an ideal thing as well. If you haven't, then it's fine. It's what it is. And then we just add on more and more and more as we go down. But I think those tend to be the ones where, when people haven't necessarily done that, they then need some sort of medical input, whether that's to see a physio or a chiropractor or an osteopath or somebody to help them out.
If I had an FAQ section of my life, I think number one...
Do you have one of those, Steph? I don't have one, but it sounds like we all need to have an FAQ section. I might build this into my life now. Yeah, go on.
The FAQ, when I say I'm a pro marathon runner, is always... Are your knees not worn out? Is running not going to destroy your joints? So the $1 million question for you, George, is running bad for your joints? Do Steph and I need to go and book in our knee replacements in a month? Because I've had lots of injury. Well, I haven't had that many injuries, but I've had a few injuries. None of them have been related to my knee joints. But
I have actually had a couple knee injuries. So...
Don't ruin my point, Steph.
Great undercut there,
From
Steph.
your
Like that.
experience of injuries, having seen a whole array, how many of them are your knee joints? Is running bad for them?
I think if we go back to what we were saying before about not being a slave to training, thinking about your body, thinking about your acute on chronic load, thinking about getting your right footwear, thinking about maybe doing some strengthening work. Because in arthritis within your joint, it's generally it tends to be improved by improving strength around that joint.
Yeah.
And so being physically active and running, if you're using running as your physical activity, is good for your bone density, which is important,
so particularly in girls. For your joints.
So there's a gain for your bone strength around doing loading activities. So over the age of 60, I go back to what we were saying about public health. So over the age of 65, you should be doing 2 sessions a week where you're doing something that's going to give you load because it's good for your bone density. So it reduces your falls risk because your balance is better. And then it means your bones are stronger so that if you do fall, you don't break something.
Yeah.
So many ways, keeping up running, if that's what you do. And you see people in their 80s and 90s, don't you, doing a marathon or doing a 10K.
Yeah, they're I think the record
absolute celebrities when it happens, aren't they? But it's brilliant. But so there's going to be rarities. But ultimately over time, all your bones and all your joints will start to wear out. That's a natural process, and you're just trying to get the use out of your body whilst you can, aren't you?
Yeah, run as much as you can whilst you can.
So I'm definitely not going to say that running's bad for your knees.
I like that.
Just to be clear.
I like that. Yeah. Well, that can go as my FAQ answer.
Yeah. I think there's just so much we can explore with you. We're going to
we need an episode 2, don't we?
Yeah, I think we could pick up a few of those points. We can pick up a few of those points.
We'll go on to our final question that we like to ask our guests. So we love supporting anyone's achievements, and we love when they celebrate their own achievements. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something in running, can be in your career, life, whatever. What would be your high five me moment where you'd give yourself a high five?
Oh, so good at not giving myself high fives most of the time. I might give you a really geeky answer.
Love it.
Which is, so I did a degree before I went to medical school, and it was all about you had to get a 2-1. And I was like, and it was all 80% in the final year. So I basically was just like, it's all about the final year. And it was really all about getting your dissertation really good. And so I just worked really hard. I just put, you talk about the hours, like you're expected to do 20 hours a week for the 10 weeks to collect your data. And I must have done twice as much hours because I was like, there's just no way I'm not getting this. So I broke all those rules about following training rules and stuff like that to get it. But then I got it, and then I got a first, and then I was like, right, well, this then opened the door to doing what I really wanted to do, which was was to be a doctor and work in sport. And so if I hadn't done that bit and really kind of put myself under pressure for that academic year, where a lot of other things kind of went out the window, then I wouldn't be here now talking to you. So that's probably my high five moment.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love it.
That is a very good one.
High five.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, George.
Well, thanks for having me.
So fascinating speaking to you. And yes, we definitely need to do a part 2 because, I mean, I have so many more questions.
Sure.
And hey, we get like a free consultation here. So when can we book you next?
Yeah, we can talk about that, can't we?
Thank you for joining us for 5 Miles Easy.
See you next week.